The night I came to return my ex's things, I expected a 5-minute exchange, one awkward goodbye, and the clean relief of finally being done. Instead, her roommate opened the door barefoot, wearing an oversized gray sweater with mascara smudged under one eye and my ex's apartment key in her hand. Then she looked at the box in my arms and said, "She's gone." I stared at her. "What do you mean, gone?" Mara Vale stepped aside just enough for me to see past her into the apartment. Half the living room was empty. The framed prints were off the walls. The little white bookshelf that used to lean near the window was gone. The blue chair Lena bought because she said it made the room feel European had disappeared too, which was funny because it had come from a discount store in Queens and squeaked whenever anyone sat down. My ex had vanished from the apartment with the same quiet efficiency she had used to vanish from our relationship. Mara watched my face, not cruelly, carefully. "She moved out this morning," she said. I shifted the box against my chest. "She knew I was coming tonight." "I know." "She texted me yesterday." "I know." "She said 7. Mara nodded once. "I know." There are moments when humiliation arrives slowly, like your brain is giving your pride a few extra seconds to leave the room first. This was one of them. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 32, a project manager for a restoration company in Brooklyn, and I had spent the last 3 weeks packing Lena's things into one cardboard box because apparently dignity after a breakup includes returning a curling iron, 2 sweaters, a cookbook she never opened, and a framed photo of us from a wedding where we were already lying with our smiles. Lena and I had been together for almost 2 years, long enough to have routines, not long enough to survive the truth. The truth was simple. She liked being loved more than she liked loving back. I didn't understand that at first. At first, I thought she was guarded, busy, complicated. A woman with ambition, taste, and a talent for making every room feel like a place I had to earn permission to enter. Then I started noticing how often I apologized when I had done nothing wrong. How often plans changed because her mood changed. How often I left her apartment feeling like I had auditioned for the role of boyfriend and failed the callback. Mara had been there for most of it. Not in the middle. Never that. She was Lena's roommate, not my friend. At least officially, but she was the one who opened the door when Lena was late. She was the one who handed me coffee once after Lena forgot we had dinner plans and stayed out with coworkers instead. She was the one who said, very quietly, "You don't have to wait in the hallway," like she was offering me shelter from more than bad weather. Mara was nothing like Lena. Lena entered rooms like she expected them to rearrange around her. Mara entered quietly and noticed what everyone else missed. She worked nights as a hospice nurse, painted small watercolor birds on her days off, and had a dry, soft way of speaking that made even sarcasm feel like it had washed its hands first. The first time I really talked to her, Lena was 40 minutes late and not answering her phone. Mara found me sitting on the stairs outside their building with flowers on my lap like an idiot in a public service announcement about misplaced hope. "She's probably still at drinks," Mara said. I looked up. "That obvious?" "The flowers are losing confidence." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. She sat 2 steps above me, leaving careful distance. After a minute, she said, "For what it's worth, they're nice flowers. She likes peonies. She says she likes peonies." I looked at her. Mara shrugged. "She throws them out after 2 days because they drop petals." That should have told me more than it did. Over time, Mara became the person I accidentally trusted. Only in small ways. A 5-minute conversation while Lena finished getting ready. A shared look when Lena made a joke that cut too close. A quiet drive safe when I left after another evening, where I had said less than I felt. Nothing inappropriate happened. Not once. Honestly, that was what made it worse. Because sometimes restraint creates more intimacy than betrayal ever could. Then Lena broke up with me in a restaurant. Not dramatically, she waited until after the appetizers, which felt both cruel and financially strategic, then told me she needed a life that didn't feel so heavy. I asked what that meant. She said, "You're wonderful, Daniel, but you want everything to matter." I remember looking at her across the table and realizing she thought that was a flaw. The next day, Mara texted me. Just one line. I'm sorry. You deserved better than that. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I deleted the thread because keeping it felt dangerous. Now, 3 weeks later, I was standing in Lena's doorway with her things in a box and Mara looked like she had not slept. What happened? I asked. Mara leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. She got a sublet in Los Angeles. Los Angeles? Apparently. She didn't mention Los Angeles. She didn't mention the movers either. I looked past her again. The apartment felt wounded. Not empty exactly, more like someone had taken the loudest parts and left the quiet ones behind. Did she leave you with the lease? Mara's expression changed. Small. Enough. That was when I understood her mascara, the sweater, the key in her hand. She did, I said. Mara looked away. It's handled. That means it isn't. It means I am currently pretending it is. I set the box down just inside the doorway. Mara. She flinched a little at her name, not because I said it harshly, but because I said it like I knew her. Maybe I did. Maybe that was the problem. She told me to give you this, Mara said, holding out an envelope. I took it. My name was written on the front in Lena's neat, elegant handwriting. Inside was a note. 3 sentences. Daniel, I thought it would be kinder not to do another goodbye. Leave my things with Mara. I hope you find someone who wants the same kind of life you do. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully because tearing it in half would have made me look like I still wanted an audience. Mara watched me. I'm sorry, she said. I looked up at her. And suddenly the strangest part of the night was not that Lena had left. It was that I felt less abandoned standing in front of the woman she left behind. Mara wrapped her arms around herself. You don't have to go right away, she said. The hallway seemed to narrow. What? She looked embarrassed now, like she had said more than she meant to. I mean, it's raining, and you carried that box across town, and I just made coffee because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. A faint, tired smile touched her mouth. She's gone, Daniel. Then softer. You can stay. I should have left. That was the correct answer. A man with any sense would have placed the box inside the door, handed over the last ugly little duties of a dead relationship, and gone home to sit with his humiliation in private. Instead, I stood there holding Lena's note while Mara waited in the doorway, wearing that oversized gray sweater and looking like someone had been abandoned so quietly she was still deciding whether she was allowed to call it pain. Rain hit the fire escape outside. Somewhere above us, a neighbor's television murmured through the ceiling. I looked at the box on the floor. She left you with the lease. Mara gave a small laugh. You say that like repeating it makes it less stupid. Does it? No. How long? 3 months. I stared at her. She moved to Los Angeles and left you with 3 months of rent? She paid part of next month. That's not generous. That's evidence. Mara's mouth almost curved. Almost. Then she rubbed one hand over her face and stepped back into the apartment. Come in before I feel worse about offering coffee to my ex-roommate's ex-boyfriend in a hallway. That sentence should have made me leave. It didn't. I picked up the box and followed her inside. The apartment felt different without Lena's things, smaller but not worse. The space near the window where the blue chair used to be was empty. A rectangle of cleaner paint marked where a framed print had hung. On the coffee table sat one mug, a folded lease, a calculator, and a notepad full of numbers written in Mara's careful handwriting. She saw me looking. Don't judge the math, she said. It has been through a lot tonight. I'm judging the person who caused the math. That's fair. I set the box near the wall. Do you want me to take it somewhere else? No, I'll mail it when she sends an address. She didn't leave one? She left an email. Mara walked into the kitchen. Very modern, very useless. I followed as far as the doorway. The kitchen was tiny, with yellow light over the sink and a kettle steaming on the stove. Mara moved carefully, like if she kept her hands busy enough, the rest of her might not collapse. I knew that kind of movement. I had used it for 3 weeks. She took down a mug and paused. Coffee? Yes. You don't have to say yes just because I offered. I know. You can also leave after. I know that too. She looked at me then, and the room shifted again. Not romantic. Not yet. More dangerous because it was honest. Two people left behind by the same woman standing in the kitchen she abandoned, pretending coffee was a normal response. Mara turned away first. She told me not to make a big deal out of it, she said. Lena? Who else has that talent? I leaned against the counter. What exactly did she say? Mara poured coffee into both mugs. That she needed a fresh start. That the apartment had started feeling heavy. That she found a creative sublet in Silver Lake and didn't want to lose it. I laughed once without humor. Heavy, I said. Mara looked over. That's what she said about me. Her expression softened in a way I wished I didn't need. I know. She told you? No. Mara handed me the mug. I heard the argument when you came here the night after the restaurant. I looked down at the coffee. Of course she had. The apartment walls were thin and Lena had never cared who heard pain as long as it wasn't hers. I'm sorry, I said. For being dumped loudly? For making you listen? Mara's eyes stayed on mine. You didn't make anyone do anything. That was such a simple sentence. It still hit hard. I took a sip of coffee mostly to avoid answering. It was strong, bitter, better than anything Lena ever made. Mara leaned back against the opposite counter. The kitchen was too small for two people trying not to admit they were aware of each other. You know what's embarrassing? She said. What? I'm not even surprised. That she left? That I didn't matter enough to get a real conversation. Her voice stayed steady, but her hand tightened around the mug. I lived with her for a year, covered rent twice when she was between jobs, picked up her dry cleaning when she had interviews, listened to her talk about needing space from everyone who wanted too much from her. She laughed softly. Apparently, I was furniture with a Venmo account. I should not have smiled. I did, only a little. Mara saw it. What? Furniture with a Venmo account is very good. It's tragic. It can be both. That got the first real smile from her. Small, tired, but real. Then the smile disappeared and I saw just how close she was to the edge. She left me the plants, she said. I looked toward the living room. Several plants remained near the window, drooping in various stages of betrayal. Were they hers? Yes. Does she know you work nights and forget to water things that don't beep? Mara blinked. Then she laughed. Not softly this time. A real laugh that broke out of her before she could stop it. The sound changed the kitchen. It made something in me unclench. She covered her mouth with one hand, embarrassed. Sorry. No, keep going. The plants need accountability. They do look abandoned. They are living metaphors. Don't say that. I'm not emotionally stable enough for plant symbolism. We both laughed then. For maybe 10 seconds, the whole awful night became absurd instead of humiliating. Then silence came back. But it was different now, less sharp. Mara looked down at her mug. I shouldn't have said you could stay. I stopped smiling. Why not? Because it sounds wrong. Does it feel wrong? She didn't answer right away. The rain kept hitting the window. Finally, she said, no. That word sat between us, quiet, unprotected. I set my mug down slowly. Mara. She looked up. I don't want this to become some weird rebound grief triangle. Good, she said, because that sounds exhausting and badly lit. I mean it. No. Her voice softened. I didn't ask you to stay because I want something from you. Then why did you? She looked toward the half-empty living room. Because when she left, Mara said, the apartment felt like proof that I had been easy to walk away from. Her eyes came back to mine. And when you stood in the hallway with that box, you looked like proof of the same thing. That hurt. Because it was true. She took a breath. I didn't want either of us to go sit alone with her version of the story. I had no clever answer for that. So I gave her the only honest one I had. Then I'll stay for one coffee. One coffee, she repeated. Maybe 2 if the plant metaphors worsen. Her mouth curved again. We moved to the living room because the kitchen was too small for everything we weren't saying. I sat on one end of the couch, Mara sat on the other, knees pulled up, mug in both hands. The gap between us was polite, necessary. Still, it felt more intimate than half the nights I had spent in that apartment with Lena sitting right beside me. For a while, we talked about practical things: the lease, the landlord, whether she could find another roommate quickly, whether I knew anyone sane enough to live with a nurse who owned dying plants and made dangerously strong coffee. Then my phone buzzed. Lena. Of course. I looked at the screen. Did you drop off the box? Please don't make tonight complicated. I stared at the message. Mara saw my face. Her? I handed her the phone without thinking. She read it. Something in her expression cooled. Then she gave it back. What are you going to say? She asked. I typed one sentence, I dropped it off. You made it complicated. Then I sent it. Mara stared at me. What? I didn't expect you to send that. Neither did I. Her eyes held mine for a moment too long, then her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She checked it. Her face changed. What? Mara turned the screen toward me, an email from Lena. Subject line: apartment. The preview read, Mara, I'm sorry this is sudden, but I need you to be flexible. I told Daniel he could stay there tonight if he needed closure, so please don't make it weird. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Mara looked at me. Her voice was very quiet. She planned this. And suddenly the apartment did not feel abandoned anymore. It felt staged. Mara read the email again. Then again. Like the words might become less insulting if she stared at them hard enough. They did not. I told Daniel he could stay there tonight if he needed closure, so please don't make it weird. There was something almost impressive about Lena's ability to leave a city and still rearrange the emotional furniture from 3,000 miles away. Mara set her phone on the coffee table with too much care. That's why she told me not to go to my night shift, she said. I looked at her. What? She texted this afternoon. Said maybe I should call out because you were coming by and might be upset. She made it sound like she was worried about you. I stared at her. She told you to stay here? Mara nodded once. And told me to come at 7. Yes. And moved out before I got here. Yes. The room went quiet. Not romantic quiet. Ugly quiet. The kind that arrives when two people realize they weren't just hurt by the same person. They were arranged. Mara stood suddenly and walked to the window. Outside rain blurred the streetlights. Her reflection looked pale in the glass, swallowed by the half-empty room behind her. I feel stupid, she said. You're not. I stayed home because she said you might need someone. She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. That was the part that got me. Not the lease, not the rent. You. I didn't know what to do with that, so I didn't move. Mara kept looking out the window. She knew I'd care. That sentence hit differently, because it wasn't only about manipulation. It was about being seen in the worst possible way. Lena had noticed Mara's kindness and used it like a spare key. I looked at the box on the floor, her things, her note, her unfinished obligation stacked neatly in cardboard. Then I said, we should not answer tonight. Mara turned. What? No more texts, no more emails, no defending ourselves to someone who created the mess and then asked us not to make it complicated. Her how are you face softened, but only a little. That sounds healthy. I'm experimenting. Dangerous. Very. Her phone buzzed again. We both looked at it. Another email. Mara didn't pick it up. Good. Then my phone buzzed. Lena? Daniel, I'm asking you to be mature. Mara is sensitive, and I don't want her reading too much into you being there. I showed Mara. Her expression changed. Not hurt this time. Anger. Quiet, clean anger. She called me sensitive. I think she called both of us inconvenient. Mara walked back to the couch, picked up her own phone, and opened the lease document on the table. No more emotional replies, she said. I sat up. What are you doing? Something practical before I start yelling into the weather. She spread the lease, Lena's email, and the calculator across the coffee table. The nurse disappeared for a second and a woman with a problem to solve took her place. She's on the lease until the end of the term, Mara said. She can leave. She cannot just invent a graceful exit and hand me 3 months of rent. You want to talk to the landlord? Tomorrow, not tonight. Tonight I want to know exactly what she owes. I moved closer, still leaving space. I'm good with contracts. She glanced at me. Restoration contracts, I added. Not emotional sabotage contracts, but still. That almost made her smile. Almost. So we worked. At midnight, in my ex's half-empty apartment, I sat on the floor beside the coffee table with the woman my ex had left behind, calculating rent, deposits, utility splits, and the exact dollar value of Lena Vale's talent for making people feel unreasonable for expecting basic decency. It should have been absurd. It was absurd, but it also steadied us. Numbers gave the night edges. Emails became evidence instead of wounds. By 1 in the morning, Mara had a list: lease obligation, unpaid utilities, missing furniture she had taken despite splitting the cost, written proof that she knowingly left without proper notice. Mara stared at the page. I can handle this. I know. She looked at me, tired but clearer now. You didn't say alone? No. Good. That word went through me quietly. Not because it was flirtation, because it was trust. Then my phone lit up again. This time, not Lena, my sister, Claire. You okay? Lena posted something weird. I opened Instagram before I could think better of it. Lena had posted a photo from an airport lounge. Sunglasses, wine glass, perfect lighting. Caption: sometimes choosing yourself means leaving behind people who confuse love with heaviness. New chapter. L.A. Be kind. I stared at it. Mara leaned over just enough to see. For a second, neither of us reacted. Then she whispered, "Wow." That one word carried enough exhaustion to fill the room. I closed the app. Mara sat back, hugging her knees. She's already turning it into a story, she said. Yes. And in her story were the weight. I looked at her. The apartment was quiet now. Rain, old pipes, the soft hum of the refrigerator. The kind of quiet where people either lie or finally stop. No, I said. In her story were the people she left before we could ask for honesty. Mara's eyes lifted. That's not the same thing. She held my gaze for a long moment, then something in her face broke open, not completely, just enough for the truth underneath to show. I was in love with her once, she said. I went still. She looked down immediately. Not when you were together, before, briefly, stupidly, she knew. I think she liked knowing. Her voice tightened. Then she brought you home and I got over it slower than I should have. The room shifted under me. Not jealousy. Something more complicated. Because suddenly the kindness, the distance, the carefulness, everything had another layer. Mara looked miserable. I didn't tell you because it wasn't yours to carry. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I said. She blinked. For what? For not turning your hurt into mine. Her eyes filled, but she held steady. Then she said very softly, I think that's why I liked you before I let myself admit it. The words landed between us, quiet and irreversible. Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Both of us froze. Another knock. Then a woman's voice from the hallway. Mara, it's Mrs. Alvarez. The landlord just called me. She says Lena gave notice that you're vacating too. Mara's face went pale. The night had just found a new way to get worse. Mara opened the door with her face still pale. Mrs. Alvarez stood in the hallway in a quilted robe, silver hair pinned back, phone in one hand, and suspicion in both eyes. She lived across the hall and knew everyone's business before the mail did. What do you mean Lena gave notice? Mara asked. Mrs. Alvarez looked past her and saw me sitting on the floor by the coffee table surrounded by lease papers and Lena's abandoned box. Her eyebrows rose. I stood too quickly. This isn't... I am too old to care what this is, Mrs. Alvarez said. I care about rent and locks and people leaving furniture by the trash. Mara blinked. Then, despite everything, she almost laughed. Mrs. Alvarez stepped inside without waiting for permission. The landlord called me because he couldn't reach you. Lena emailed him saying both of you were vacating at the end of the month. Mara's voice went flat. She what? She said you agreed. I did not agree. I know. Mrs. Alvarez looked around the apartment. You are many things, mija. Quiet, overworked, terrible with plants, but not stupid. Mara closed her eyes for half a second. That tiny kindness hit her harder than the insult probably would have. I reach for the lease. Do you have the landlord's number? Mrs. Alvarez looked at me. And you are? I hesitated. Mara answered before I could. He's Daniel. That was all, not Lena's ex. Not a problem. Just my name. Mrs. Alvarez studied me for a second, then handed me the number. Daniel looks angry, she said. I'm trying to be constructive. Men always say that before sending emails. Mara actually smiled. Good, we needed one. The landlord picked up on the third ring, already defensive. His name was Paul, and within 30 seconds it became clear that Lena had done what Lena always did. Provided just enough information to make herself look reasonable, and everyone else look difficult. She said both tenants were leaving, Paul said. Mara stood beside me, shoulders tight. I never said that. She copied you on the email. I was copied after she sent it. Well, I already have a showing scheduled tomorrow afternoon. Mara went still. That was the moment I heard her breathing change. Not panic. Rage, trying to stay polite. I held the phone toward her. She took it. Paul, she said, voice quiet enough to sharpen the room. I am on the lease. I have not given notice. I have not agreed to vacate. You do not have permission to show this apartment tomorrow, and if you enter without proper notice or consent, I will put everything in writing before breakfast. Mrs. Alvarez smiled like she had just seen a niece win a spelling bee with a knife. Paul stammered. Mara did not. She asked for the communication record, requested confirmation by email, clarified that Lena remained financially responsible unless formally released. Said the words, tenant rights, with the calm of someone who had spent years translating other people's panic into precise language. By the time she ended the call, the apartment felt different. Not safe, not fixed, but no longer surrendered. Mara handed me the phone. Her hand was shaking. I noticed. She noticed me noticing. Don't say anything kind, she said. I was going to say that was terrifying. That's acceptable. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. Good girl. Mara looked like she might cry again, but she didn't. Instead, she said, I need to email him. I'll help, I said, then corrected myself. If you want. She looked at me. That distinction mattered. I want, she said. Mrs. Alvarez left after making Mara promise not to let anyone bully her out of the apartment. At the door, she looked at me and said, You don't make trouble worse. I'll try not to. That is not a promise. No, ma'am. She seemed satisfied by the honesty and left. For the next hour, Mara and I built the cleanest email I had ever helped write. Dates, lease clauses, screenshots, Lena's notice, Mara's non-consent, request for confirmation. No insults, even though several were deserved. When she finally sent it, she leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. I should feel better. You stopped a showing, documented the lie, and made your landlord nervous at 2 a.m. That's not nothing. It still feels like she keeps reaching into the room. I looked at the box. Lena's sweaters, Lena's curling iron, Lena's note, Lena's ability to turn other people into loose ends. One. Then I stood, picked up the box and carried it to the entryway. Mara sat up. What are you doing? Moving her out of the center of the apartment. I placed it beside the door, not dramatic, just enough. When I turned around, Mara was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. What? I asked. She always made people orbit her, she said. Yeah, you just moved the planet. I smiled faintly. Seemed overdue. The rain had softened by then. The apartment was still half empty, still full of problems, still technically the place my ex had staged one final emotional mess. But Mara looked less like someone left behind. She looked like someone standing in the wreckage and deciding what belonged to her. I checked the time. It's almost 3. You should go. The sentence came out automatic. We both heard it. Mara looked down. I didn't mean that. I know. I mean, you can, obviously. You should sleep. You have a life that does not involve emergency lease warfare. My life is flexible. That sounds fake. It is, but I'm staying anyway if you want me to. Her eyes lifted. There it was again. The dangerous simplicity of the word stay. She stood slowly. Daniel, I don't want to become the person you choose because Lena hurt you. You're not. You don't know that yet. That was fair. Pain makes everything look like shelter if the light is soft enough. So I did not step closer. I know this, I said. I felt more seen in one bad night with you than I did in 2 years trying to be enough for her. Mara's mouth parted slightly. I kept going before fear edited me into something safer. And I know I don't want to use that feeling carelessly. Her eyes filled. Not like before. This was different. Less wounded? More afraid of hope? She whispered, I liked you before tonight. The room went still. I tried not to, she said. I had good reasons, then bad reasons, then no reasons except fear. I looked at her. Mara, if you kiss me tonight, she said, voice trembling, I need it not to be because she left. That was the line. Clean. Necessary. I crossed the room slowly and stopped in front of her. Close enough to feel the question, not enough to take the answer. Then I won't kiss you tonight, I said. Her face changed. Surprise first, then something softer, deeper. I touched her hand once, just briefly. Ask me tomorrow, I said. Mara looked at our hands, then back at me, and for the first time all night, her smile had no apology in it. Stay on the couch, she whispered. I nodded. 1 couch. 1 coffee in the morning. Maybe 2 if the plants look worse. They will. Then 2. She laughed quietly, and the sound made the apartment feel less abandoned. A few hours later, just before dawn, I woke on the couch to the sound of Mara in the kitchen. She stood by the window in the same gray sweater, reading something on her phone. Her face had gone cold. I sat up. What happened? She turned the screen toward me. A new email from Lena. I need you both to stop acting like victims. I did what was best for everyone. Mara looked at me. This time, she wasn't crying. She was done. Tomorrow, she said, we answer properly. Mara did not answer Lena's email right away. That was the first sign that something had changed. The old version of the night would have answered immediately. Defended, explained. Tried to make Lena understand the damage she had caused, as if understanding had ever been the missing ingredient. But Mara just set the phone on the kitchen table, poured coffee into 2 mugs, and said, I'm going to shower before I write something legally useful instead of spiritually satisfying. That sounds like growth. It feels like indigestion. By 9, we had 3 things ready. A formal email to the landlord confirming Mara was not vacating, a separate email to Lena with the lease obligations attached, and a folder of screenshots proving Lena had knowingly staged the handoff, misrepresented Mara's consent, and tried to control the story afterward. Mara sat at the kitchen table in clean jeans, her hair damp, the gray sweater replaced by a navy one that looked less like surrender. She read the email to Lena one last time. It was perfect. No begging, no anger, no emotional courtroom. Just facts. You are still responsible for your share of the lease unless formally released. You did not have my consent to give notice. You do not have my consent to use my apartment as closure for your breakup. Going forward, communication about rent, utilities, and property should be in writing only. At the bottom, Mara added 1 sentence. You left, Lena. Stop trying to manage the room you abandoned. Then she sent it. For a second, we both just stared at the screen. Nothing exploded. No music played. The plants did not revive. But Mara breathed like she had been holding air since yesterday afternoon. There, she said. I lifted my mug. To legally useful indigestion. She smiled. Then her phone rang. Lena. Mara watched it buzz until it stopped. A minute later, mine rang. Lena. I declined it. Mara looked at me. You didn't have to. Yes, I said, I did. By noon, the landlord had replied in a very different tone. No showing, no vacating notice, no changes without Mara's direct written confirmation. He also confirmed Lena remained on the lease unless all parties signed a release. By 3, Lena sent a long email, then another, then one that began with, I'm sorry you both misunderstood, which was so bad. Mara and I looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Not because it was funny, because some people can apologize and still keep the knife in their hand. Mara did not respond. That was the second sign. The third came that evening when Mrs. Alvarez knocked and handed Mara a small pot of soup, a packet of tenant rights flyers, and a cutting from one of her plants. This one is hard to kill, she said, looking at the dying plants by the window. For practice. Mara held the cutting like a sacred object. After Mrs. Alvarez left, I said, that plant has a lot of pressure on it. It knows what it's signing up for. I stayed that night too. On the couch. Nothing happened. That mattered. In the morning, Mara made coffee, looked at me across the kitchen and said, it's tomorrow. I set my mug down. So it is. You said ask you tomorrow. I remember. She walked around the table slowly, not seductive, not dramatic, just brave in the quiet way that had been there all along. If I ask you to kiss me, she said, it's not because Lena left. I know. And it's not because the apartment is empty. I know. And it's not because we both got hurt by the same person. I stepped closer. Then why? Her eyes held mine. Because before all of that, I noticed the way you waited for someone who didn't deserve your waiting, and I wanted very badly to be the person who opened the door and told you to come inside. That was the sentence that ended the old story. So I kissed her. Not like a rebound, not like revenge. Like two people who had spent too long being careful around the wrong person and were finally allowed to be careful with each other. We did not become simple after that. Simple would have been dishonest. Mara still had a lease problem. I still had a breakup that had left more bruises than I wanted to admit. Lena still tried for a while to send emails that sounded graceful until you read the second paragraph. But the room changed. Mara found a new roommate through a nurse she trusted. Lena paid after Mara sent the documents and mentioned small claims court exactly once. The box of Lena's things sat by the door for 9 days until she finally provided an address, and when I mailed it, I felt nothing dramatic. No closure thunder, just postage. Mara and I went slowly. Actual dates, not crisis meetings disguised as intimacy. Coffee after her night shifts. Walks through Brooklyn when the weather turned kind. Dinner in small places where nobody knew Lena's name. One afternoon in the park where Mara sketched a sparrow on a napkin and pretended it wasn't beautiful. 3 months later, she came to my apartment for the first time. She stood in my doorway holding takeout and said, your place is very clean for a man with emotional damage. I hired a professional. A therapist? A vacuum. She laughed, and I knew then that I wanted that sound in every room I lived in. A year later, we moved into a different apartment. Not hers, not mine. Ours. No ghosts in the corners. No abandoned plants except the one from Mrs. Alvarez, which somehow survived and became smug about it. 2 years later, Lena emailed me once more. No apology. Just a polished little message saying she hoped we were well and that Los Angeles had taught her a lot about herself. I showed Mara. She read it, handed the phone back, and said, good for Los Angeles. Then she watered the plant. That was the final door closing. 3 years after the night I came to return a box, I proposed to Mara in our kitchen while she was painting a tiny watercolor bird at the table. I had planned a better speech. Of course I had, but she looked up with blue paint on her wrist, tired eyes, and that soft, dry smile that had saved me before I knew I needed saving. So I simply said, stay? She stared at me. Then she saw the ring. Her eyes filled. You know, she whispered, that word has caused us a lot of trouble. It also worked. She laughed through tears and said yes. Years later, when people asked how we met, Mara usually said, he dated my roommate. I'd say, briefly, unfortunately, Then Mara would add, "He came to return a box." And I would look at her and remember the half-empty apartment, the rain, the coffee, the woman in the gray sweater who opened the door and told me the truth. She's gone. You can stay. The truth was, I came there to return my ex's things. But what I really returned was the version of myself that kept waiting outside doors where I was never fully wanted. Mara opened one. And this time, I stayed. What would you have done if you went to return your ex's things and found out she had left you with one last emotional mess? And have you ever realized the person who quietly saw your pain was the one you should have noticed all along? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.